Hi, everybody. How are you? My name is Adeo Resi. I'm joined here by Sam. You want to just quickly say hello, Sam?
Hey everybody, nice to meet you all. I'll introduce myself in a few minutes.
So, we're going to get started on an exciting information session on LP Institute. We have some pretty good turnout. I know, apologies for moving the time. That happens on occasion. Sam's had some issues he had to work around, and he's the uh, leader of the program. So, we definitely wanted him to talk with you about what the program offered, how it worked, and everything like that. And I lead vessel group overall, as well as help with the program. So I just wanted to say hello for a couple minutes. We've got some really exciting things in store for you. And I think it's probably one of the most interesting times in history to be an investor in venture capital. We've been talking internally a lot about the LP Institute and the growing demand of investors for the venture capital asset class. And so I just want to say a couple words, turn it over to Sam, and leave you in really good hands. So we look at the world right now as in just one of the most exciting times in history with AI coming out and really advancing all sorts of industries. So you logically or industries that make the most sense for AI to advance, like SaaS or even healthcare. And then you've got areas where AI is doing really interesting things that no one really expected, like creating new materials and material sciences. For example, there was this report of material designed by AI that's harder than steel and lighter than foam that just came out, and the applications in aircraft and various fields are enormous. So it's a very interesting time to be investing. And venture capital really is the best way to do investments in this time because it's very hard to pick winners, like who's going to be the winning company in a certain field. So the best thing that you can do as a manager is, or as an investor, is back expert managers that understand fields like AI or material sciences or healthcare or climate, have them make for the same amount of money that it might take you to do a single investment, you can invest in a VC fund and that manager will make, let's say, 20 or 25 investments. So you get a much broader diversification of your investment dollars across more opportunities to get a winning company. And the way that modern startup investing works is it's all about getting into the winner. A single company, because of the power law, may result in all of the returns in a fund. So, if a fund invests in a company and it gets a 3x, it doesn't really move the needle on the overall fund performance because they've got 19 other portfolio companies, right? So it's the investments that generate 1,000x or even a 10,000x that really define modern day startup investing. And your best chances to hit one of those mega returning investments is to have diversification with expert managers. And so the LP Institute is designed, and Sam will tell you more about this, to really help you to find those managers that really know what they're doing. It will show you how to make an investment in them and understand what that entails and understand the time frames, the selection process, the legal terms, everything that you need to know so you can participate in what will be one of the most interesting times in history to be an investor. The future right now is very uncertain, right? Because there's so much technology coming out, it's not clear what the impact will be. But it's pretty certain that now is one of the best times to be an investor because as that uncertainty becomes clearer and clearer, like who's going to win the LLM trophy, if you will? Is it going to be something like ChatGPT or Grok, or maybe it's Gemini by Google? Who knows? But as that certainty becomes clearer, the ability to make money as an investor becomes lower, right? So it's in these moments of uncertainty that you can make these investments that get that 10,000 or even 100,000 X. That's just not possible when things are much clearer about how the future is going to shape up. So let me turn it over to Sam here. Really excited to see everybody. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself? I'll kind of drop off camera, and I'm really excited to, and I'll listen in as an observer.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Adeo. That introduction was fantastic. And, I really think Adeo made some fantastic points around sort of the macro, and why we think that, investing in emerging venture capital funds is really one of the best approaches to VC, investing in the VC asset class overall. I'm going to go into some of the specifics around the program, and sort of how we combine education, access, and community into this program that we've put together at the LP Institute. So I'm Sam Hewlett. I'm a former founder. I've been an active angel investor for the last 10 years or so. I'm an active LP. I've spent pretty much my entire career in startups and in venture capital. And I currently, as Adeo mentioned, run the LP Institute along with Adeo, and also focus on what we call capital networks initiatives at Dessel Group. So that basically comes down to, how do we get more, fantastic investors like yourselves interacting with the great managers that are coming out of our ecosystem. So just a couple of words on how we're going to run today's program. I'm going to go into some depth around what you can expect out of the LP Institute experience, and then we're going to close out with some Q&A. So if you've got questions about the program, you can feel free to start populating them into chat, and we'll sort of address those toward the end of today's session. And there'll be the opportunity, if you want to come off chat and just ask your question live, feel free to do that as well. So just I'll start with a quick overview of Dessel Group. So Dessel Group, which is sort of the parent level company under which the LP Institute and VC Labs sit, really provides training, tools, and capital to help build the next generation of venture capital funds. And the mission is to transform venture capital into an ethical force for good. And so we do this through a few different programs. The first is, VC Lab, which is the world's leading accelerator program for emerging venture capital funds. I believe we launched something like half of all new fund managers last year, which is a pretty incredible accomplishment. The LP Institute, which is what you're all here for, is a structured program for limited partners, i.e. those people who invest in venture capital funds, right, to learn how to invest and find top tier venture capital fund managers. We also run a program called Venture Institute, which is designed to help professionals launch a career in venture capital. And then we have a couple of systems that we've built internally, including Dessel Hub, which is essentially a full operating system to streamline the venture capital firm operations. We have Dessel Partners, which is a community and support system for some of the best emerging funds in our ecosystem. And we have Dessel Capital, which is our own fund of funds who invests in the top emerging funds within the VC Lab ecosystem, as well as additional funds outside of it. So today, as I mentioned, our focus is going to be on the LP Institute and how it equips investors like yourselves with the skills, the network, and the confidence to back top performing VC funds. So it's kind of hard for me to believe, but we're actually going to be going into the 6th cohort of the LP Institute. Time flies. And, like all good startups, we're always sort of pivoting and, trying to, make the experience better and better for our participants. So we've learned a lot over, the last 5 cohorts that we're bringing into this 6th iteration, and I'm excited to share some of those updates with you. So the LP Institute is an 8-week program. We cover sourcing, how to, you can think about in venture capital, people will often refer to this adverse selection problem, right? Which is that, you really want to make sure, as Adeo mentioned, when you're dealing with, the power law, that you're really getting into the best possible funds. And, we're going to help you put together a plan for how to source those really, most high potential managers. We also are going to walk you through everything you need to know about how to perform due diligence, right? And there are multiple, steps along the way in due diligence, and we'll discuss a few of those in a moment. And then we're going to try and help you successfully close on at least one venture capital fund investment. And this is a key part of the program. I'll go into more detail, but we essentially ask everyone participating in the LP Institute to have at least 5 meetings with GPs. The idea is that we really believe in learning by doing, and we really want, to make sure you're getting in the reps, and it's not just theoretical reading through a curriculum, but you're actually out there in the real world, right? Meeting with GPs and starting to build that pattern recognition and develop your sense of taste as an LP. So a common question we get is, what can I expect around time commitment for the program? What I generally tell people is to expect about 4 hours, maybe a little bit more per week during the 8 weeks that the program's running. So each of the 8 weeks we refer to as a sprint week. The program itself, generally goes over maybe 10 to 12 weeks, depending on, holidays. We give people some break weeks here or there to try and catch up on some of the work. But, in general, expect, anywhere maybe from 4 to 5, 3 to 5 hours. Really depends in part on what you want to get out of the program, as well as, how well versed or sophisticated you already are in terms of, your knowledge as an LP. Our sessions are typically on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And, we do have some light homework assignments in there. And really, I'll speak more to those. But the idea is that we have a robust online curriculum, and we want to, reinforce some of those key learnings and insights that you're going to be picking up, both from the curriculum and your meetings with managers. And we found that the best way to do that are through some of these, light homework assignments. So as I mentioned, the curriculum is very hands-on. The goal is to have you meet with 5 or more GPs during, the roughly 8 weeks. Along the way, you're going to revise, or in some cases build, if you're brand new to LP investing, you're going to build your diligence process or refine it. We use the Tuesday sessions for what we call social sessions. So the idea is kind of to use a combination of formats around group learning. So we both have what we call small groups, or our working groups, where you're going to be matched with, probably 10 to 15 other LPs who have, similar interest areas or writing similar check sizes. And then we also utilize a format that we call the AMA format. So basically, these are, kind of open field questions. Feel free to ask us anything, and the entire group benefits from hearing, the answers and the, kind of robust discussions that often follow. So those Tuesday sessions usually start with an AMA and then break off for the working groups. We also are asking everyone to, by the end of the program, pick what we call a finalist fund. Now, most people will end up investing in their finalist fund, but I do want to make the point that there is not a hard requirement that you need to invest by the end of the program. Our goal, however, is to look for and select participants who have high intent around making an investment. And the reason for that is sort of twofold. One, we think it's the best way to learn. Having skin in the game, actually putting capital to work, right? You're going to take your meetings with GPs much more seriously if your intention is to sort of put capital to work. And then secondarily, everyone's time is valuable, and so if we have you meeting with GPs, we don't want to be leading those GPs on, right? So in general, we're looking for people who, if they found the right investment for them, would be excited to sort of pull the trigger, so to speak. I also want to talk about some of the common archetypes that we have who participate in the program. We have a lot of active angel investors. who maybe have done, a handful of angel investments. Maybe some of them haven't been so successful. Maybe some have, but a lot of those folks are looking at investing through funds as sort of a better risk-adjusted approach to venture capital, as sort of Adeo alluded to in the opening. Other angel investors, who might be super active, may actually see, the opportunity to invest in funds is another approach to sourcing, right? Often, a lot of these fund managers that you'll invest with will also be sharing, additional allocation in their best deals, where they might invite their LPs to co-invest with them along the way. We get a lot of high net worth individuals. Often that looks like, maybe exited founders, folks who have come into some recent liquidity event. We have a lot of family offices who typically participate. That's always interesting to me, and we have quite a spectrum. So we'll have both family offices that have maybe never invested in venture before, as well as family offices who are super active in venture, but maybe haven't been allocating as much to new and emerging venture funds, fund ones, fund twos, and are looking both for additional insights into how to underwrite those opportunities, as well as access to some of the top emerging funds that are coming out of the VC Lab program. We also typically have a handful of institutional investors that can sort of run the gamut from corporate venture capital funds to other fund of funds. And so, it's really a wide spectrum. And one of the things I, tell people is that, if you're also just looking for really high quality networking, I think the LP Institute is, like, probably bar none, one of the most incredible places to network among other allocators in private markets that you'll find. Also, just a quick note, all participants in the LP Institute must be accredited and comfortable with, kind of standard fund minimums. Typically, those fund minimums are often like $100,000 and up. But we do have a new vehicle that I'll talk about in a second called the Start Fund, which is making, the ability to invest into funds at lower minimums much more accessible, and sort of democratizing venture to some extent. So we'll talk more about that in a second. So a couple of reasons to join the program. Number one, I think you really want to expand your access to top tier venture funds. So I mentioned this concept that comes up all the time in venture capital, the worry around adverse selection. Well, we run what we think of as sort of an internal marketplace, where we feature some of the best potential, high potential funds that come out of our ecosystem. It's really like the top 5% of participants from VC Lab that ultimately make it into our marketplace. And of course, you're free to meet with additional funds if you have, if you already have a pipeline. Those 5 manager meetings that we ask you to have, could be from your own pipeline of deals. But a lot of people opt to, allow us to help with some curated introductions to, venture funds that fit your interest areas, that are part of our ecosystem. And so in a lot of ways, we're working hard to also provide that initial filter of really high quality managers to help you avoid that, adverse selection issue. Secondarily, we really want everyone to gain confidence in evaluating investment opportunities, really from a first principles approach. So as a, active angel investor, I've certainly succumbed in the past, right, to that sort of, herd mentality or FOMO investing. And I think that's very common, right? But what we really want with this program is to make sure that you feel confident in evaluating a fund on its own merits, with making sure you know what to ask for, and you can do the analysis yourself, right? It's always nice if you're investing alongside high signal folks, or trusted friends, but the ability to sort of analyze a fund manager on their own merits, and do it from sort of that first principles perspective is really important. And so we hope that you're going to walk away feeling confident to do that. And lastly, I want to highlight, a reason to join. And again, the networking here is incredible, but really also just the opportunity to level up among a like-minded peer network, right? When everybody comes together with a shared goal of trying to both learn and sort of get access to, the best opportunities in venture capital, really good things happen. And so we really believe that that sort of, peer-driven learning is a huge unlock for folks. So let's talk quickly about what's new going into cohort 6. Well, first of all, you can expect more emphasis on meeting managers. I've alluded to this a few times, that kind of requirement to meet with 5 managers. Many people will meet with 10 or 15. But again, the thing that we hear time and time again is that venture capital, whether you're doing direct company investing or fund investing, is really challenging at the start, because especially when it comes to fund managers, everybody looks good on paper. Everybody's impressive. But you still have that concept of the power law, right? Which basically means that if you're not in sort of the top quartile or top decile even of performance, you're really not getting that sort of you know liquidity risk premium that you really need to have in the venture capital space to feel that your returns merit not investing in public equities or something like that. So we really believe that you need to be out there getting the reps in, meeting managers, and building that pattern recognition and sense of taste for the types of GPs that you want to back. Some of the ways that we're making this happen that are relatively new in the program include a live demo day. So often to start out the program, we'll pick a couple of our top managers and actually have them present. We do it in a very fun, sort of interactive way. The managers generally are talking a little bit about their thesis area, as well as really highlighting one of their portfolio companies that they feel really embodies their sort of investing ethos. We've also recently incorporated an event type that has become just a smash hit, which we call somewhat jokingly speed dating. So the way that that typically has been working is that we'll invite some of the top funds in our marketplace, as well as LP Institute participants, into sort of a virtual platform where we've used a couple of different things. Often we'll use a system called AirMeet, which actually facilitates sort of almost like round robin meetings. So it's a really casual way to start to meet with funds, where you're kind of in a sort of time boxed you have sort of a time box on it, so you don't have to worry about meetings running too long, or, oh, what if I meet somebody who I'm not interested in? While at the same time, it's very conducive to just kind of casual conversations, getting to know somebody. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning more about their fund, you can follow up with them, for a much more in-depth discussion. But these have been an absolutely smash hit. We ran one a few weeks back where it actually generated 150 individual meetings, and the comments afterward have just been fantastic. Actually, a couple of people went out and got lunch the next day when they realized, oh, we both live in the Bay Area or something like that. So there's some really fun stories out of that. So I think that's one of these new formats that we're really going to double down on, and people seem to like. We'll also be covering a lot of advanced investing topics. So we've heard loud and clear that people want more insights around operational due diligence, around legal insights. So we've invited our head of Treasury and Compliance, Angela, to come and talk to the group. Angela is an ex-Sequoia person, incredibly smart when it comes to fund treasury management and operations. So some really incredible insights there that most LPs, even if you've been investing for quite a while, it's not an area generally that people are very well versed in. So some really awesome stuff there. Also, the ability to learn from the best. Our Wednesday sessions, and as a reminder, usually our sessions are Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The Wednesday session is usually a guest speaker. And so we've had some incredible folks from Cambridge Associates. I've got a conversation next week we're having with a speaker from Stepstone, which is one of the most prominent, sort of fund of funds out there, Bain Capital Ventures, Lightspeed, the list goes on and on. But we bring in really fantastic, experienced LPs to kind of talk to the group about how they got to where they are, their insights around diligence and manager selection. And then we keep it very interactive with, a chunk of time at the end dedicated to questions. So if you've got specific questions for that speaker, you're invited to, come off mute and ask away. So those are always really fun. And then I'd be remiss not to mention just general socialization, right? The ability to network with other people. We've been doing more and more IRL. VC Lab, the LP Institute generally are pretty virtual in the style of format that we use. But now being in our sixth cohort, right, we've got a lot of representation in a lot of the different, major geographies, from, the Bay Area to New York, and internationally, London, you name it, lots of folks in India. And so we're having more and more of these opportunities to get together IRL, which to me is really exciting. So let's just talk a little bit more about the program structure. Just a few more minutes from me, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So feel free to start populating those questions or get ready to come off mute and ask away. So the way that we structure sort of the curriculum is really into two parts. So part one is what we call the foundations of venture capital. So that's going to include an orientation, which is the first session that you'll attend, where we're going to get you up to speed on really all of the questions that you might have around the program. We're going to get you access to the curriculum, to Dessel Hub, as well as Dessel Pro. So, we kind of get all of the good 101 stuff out of the way in orientation. We then get into the venture overview, which is kind of that more macro level. So learning about the power law, things like that. A lot of the good stuff that Adeo was starting to cover in today's introduction. Then we get into venture scouting, sourcing, how to find great managers in sort of early stages of venture diligence. Part two of the program gets into investment execution, right? So we're going to get into venture tools, how to sort of select or pick your opportunities, legal advice, and how to close on an investment. And I'll add, post close, right? How to be a value add LP on an ongoing basis. So, just to kind of wrap things up here, participants, folks who are going to join LP Institute 6 are going to benefit from introductions to top emerging managers. I haven't covered yet investment packages with lower minimums. So I had mentioned that the typical minimum for a more traditional fund, probably starts on the low end around $100,000. And I realize, that can be a lot of money, especially for folks who are more used to, writing angel size checks. There are, and we go over all of this, there are capital calls and other ways where maybe that 100,000 gets kind of broken up into different tranches. One of the really exciting things is that Dessel Group has just recently, I think as of this summer, launched a new type of vehicle that we call the Start Fund. And I can't speak to all of the details of this, type of vehicle, but essentially for folks who are raising initial sort of more proof of concept or smaller venture capital funds, the Start Fund allows for you to get a fund off the ground very quickly, but also is able to accommodate much smaller checks as low as $10,000. So one of the things that we've started to do is accept more LPs that we sort of refer to as supporter LPs, meaning that their check size is going to be probably less than what a traditional fund might require, but through learning in the program, through your own experiences as an investor, maybe as an operator or former founder, right, you can be a huge value add to a lot of these funds. And so we've really started to help kind of craft this persona of sort of supporter LPs who are able to invest in many of our funds at much lower minimums, because of some of the training that you're going to get through our program, as well as your ability to add value from being an expert or from your from your network that you've built over the years. Also, we sometimes will feature co-investment opportunities with our fund of funds. So sometimes when our fund of funds, Decil Capital, is investing in a fund, we'll make that same fund available for investment from folks participating in LP Institute. And then lastly, you're going to get a lot of hands-on guidance. So one of the aspects of our program that honestly doesn't get as much use as it probably should. It's sort of like the hidden gem, I think, of the program. Are our office hours. So these are opportunities for you to meet one-on-one with folks like Adeo or Marco, who runs our fund of funds. So these have been really impactful sessions, especially for a lot of family offices that are thinking through, allocation strategies or portfolio construction, or maybe, just some questions around how to properly message GPs who you're meeting with, but maybe are, still, need more time for diligence. So those sort of personalized sessions that are one-on-one with Adeo, Marco, myself, I think can be hugely valuable and really help to personalize the experience as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us. That's kind of the nitty gritty of the program. There are a lot more details that we'll cover, of course, once you've joined. But it's really just a fantastic program. We've had some incredible outcomes for people. Typically we've seen well over $1 million or more invested, per cohort. So people have invested in fantastic funds, but also, we've seen, wealth managers kind of use this as a catalyst to start, more of a robust alternatives practice. We've seen fund of funds launch. We've seen family offices, right, really create programs on the back of what they've learned from, the LP Institute. So, there's something for everybody here. I'm really excited for, what we're going to do with, this sixth cohort. So let me open up the Q&A, see if there are any questions, or, feel free to come off. Well, maybe there's no way to come off mute. I think we're using a slightly different format here. But let's see. Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we've got any questions. So maybe everybody's, read all the documentation we've got online here. But if you've got any questions that I could answer, feel free to pop those into Q&A. I'll give you, a couple of minutes to do that. You can also enter them into the webinar chat. Happy to, take a look there as well. All right, we've got a question here. What's the process to join cohort 6? Yeah, so the process to join is you can go into I think Dominica is linked to it here. govclab.com/LP Institute. I'll repost here. You want to apply. And once you've applied, we're going to obviously take a look, make sure you're qualified. Again, everybody applying needs to be an accredited investor. We need to see some intent around wanting to put some capital to work. There's some basic things that we're looking for to qualify folks. You'll then have an interview, usually with myself. So those are usually pretty quick. Maybe a 15-20 minute phone call. Just to get to know you, sort of understand, the types of investments you're looking for, how you can add value, to our community. Make sure, you're not a total jerk or something, right? And then that's it. Once you had the interview with me, there's a very good chance that, you're going to be selected, and you'll hear from our team usually within, 48 hours or so. Once you're in the program, depending on how much time we have before the next cohort is starting, we'll often invite you to some events that are taking place in the meantime. And then we kick things off with an orientation and get after it right after that. How long does it take to hear back about the result of the application? Yeah, so generally once you apply, we'll usually respond within, I'd say at the most a week. Usually it's a few days. We've got a pretty awesome team here that is reviewing applications, and then, you'll be invited to schedule an interview again, generally with myself. And so, it's kind of up to you. You can select anytime. I usually have the calendar going out for 10 days or so. So I'd say once you apply, within a couple of weeks, you should probably be having your interview and, hearing back as to whether or not you're selected. All right. What's the breakdown of the experience first time section that VC managers introduced by the LP Institute have? Um, so I think in terms of experience, Emmy, you're asking about, um, it sounds like funds, but I'll also speak to LPs. So generally, VC Lab, the funds that you're going to meet as an LP tend to be fund ones, fund twos, and some fund threes. The reason for that is the VC Lab program, Dessel Group, really focuses on emerging managers. There's some really incredible data that we'll go through during the program around, the potential for real outperformance from fund three. And so those are the types of funds that you're going to meet within our marketplace, and are the majority of the funds that we have in our ecosystem. When it comes to LP experience, there's really quite a spectrum that I think I alluded to before, which is, both sort of angel investors who have some experience investing in startups. We'll get high net worth folks, right, who maybe have never made a venture capital investment before, maybe coming from more of a real estate or private equity, kind of lower middle market background, something like that. And this will be their first time, making an investment in venture. And then we've got family offices who, or even fund of funds, right, who have been actively investing in venture capital funds for a decade or more. But again, are looking for that education specific to emerging funds, as well as access, and of course, like, access to both great investment opportunities, but also to, our network of other allocators. When does cohort six start? Great question. I'd say, things can be a bit of a moving target, but I believe that we're looking to start late fall. So, probably somewhere in November, maybe early November, or something like that. How many participants? Great question. Usually there are about 50 or so participants per cohort. I think we have more like 60 in the current cohort. But yeah, usually falls somewhere in the 50 to 60 range. And will you have access to past attendees in prior cohorts? That's a really great question. So we've been doing more sessions where we'll invite past participants to, come join a networking session, or meet with managers or something like that. Um, but we're not going to provide you with like a list, or as of yet, we don't really have any sort of directory of all past participants. And partially, I think we do that just, respect for people's privacy. We have a lot of folks who, are pretty sophisticated, high net worth family offices and things like that, who don't necessarily want, people reaching out to them on a regular basis, or kind of just knowing, that they participated, right? So I think it's a great idea at some point, probably, to have more of like a directory system for those who want to opt into it, just to facilitate more interaction between past and future cohorts. I'm just thinking about this in real time, but it's a great suggestion. And yeah, we are working to do more integrating past cohorts. We use Slack to connect the community. Yes, absolutely. Great. These are great points that I should have probably covered. But yeah, we have a couple of ways that we facilitate the community aspect of the program. The first is Slack. Um, Probably most of you, on this call are familiar with Slack. But we also use WhatsApp, and we have a very global a very global program. So actually, close to 50% of participants are probably from outside the United States, which was a surprise to me when we started the program. I would have assumed 80% of participants would be sort of some combo of the Bay Area plus New York. But we've actually had people from all over the globe who participate. So everywhere from, Africa, India, lots of folks in the UK. So we also use WhatsApp because that's kind of a popular choice outside of the US. So a combination of Slack and WhatsApp sort of help keep the community vibrant. Another question about how many LPs were taking this cohort. Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier, typically we have about 50 or so LPs who participate per cohort. So I would expect that number will be, directionally accurate for the cohort as well. What time do we organize the events? Yep. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays are typically the session days, and those are at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And yes, we found that that sort of time slot typically has worked best for the largest majority of folks kind of across the time zones that we have. So ends up being something like 6 p.m. in London, later in, MENA region or India. But, we found that most people are able to attend the virtual sessions at those times. Yeah, great question here around pricing structure. So this is one of the coolest aspects in my mind about the LP Institute program. There really is not a charge at this time to participate. And the way that this is typically facilitated is that we ask everybody to have a reference from a fund or somebody connected to our ecosystem. And assuming that you can come in with a reference, we have not charged people in the past. If for some reason you really don't have a reference, but you've been active in the space, we can work something out. But I think it's one of the really cool parts of this program is that we're really aligned with trying to really just attract capital and attention to emerging managers in general. And we're not trying to turn the LP Institute into a revenue stream or something like that. Just kind of going through to see if I missed any questions here. Do we offer any offline events or sessions? Yeah, I think I mentioned that, we're doing more around that. There isn't any sort of regular interval, I would say, to when we're doing in-person sessions, but what it's typically been, I would say, is maybe like 3 or so in-person sessions, per year or so in the Bay Area, usually a couple here in New York. What we're really hoping for is for more like local leaders to sort of take charge and want to host, local events. But VC Lab does occasionally host, larger get-togethers, especially in the Bay Area. We tend to do them in tandem with team offsites that we have. If I could get into the program, wanted to get started sooner than November. Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a way to get started now. We have a live cohort that's going on, cohort 5, that's really only, maybe halfway through. So it'd be a little late to add somebody to the current cohort, but I'd happy to kind of talk to you and see if we can get you maybe, some access to a couple of sessions just to give you a flavor of what's getting covered. Kindly say concisely about all 3 programs one more time. Okay, so I think the question is, and then unfortunately I'm going to have to jump in a second, but I believe the question is about the 3 main programs that fall under Decibel Group. So we have VC Lab, which is a program that really helps jumpstart new venture capital funds. So you only want to join that program if you're a GP. You plan on raising a fund. You're actively raising a fund because the whole program is oriented around fundraising, being out there, talking to LPs, and raising capital for your venture opportunity. The Venture Institute is, I'd say, kind of more of a high-level program that covers, everything you would want to know about venture capital as an asset class. And a lot of folks will use it as a bridge to maybe a career change where they want to get into the venture capital space, or kind of more broadly work with startups or accelerators, right? So it's a real really around sort of education and career transition. The LP Institute, on the other hand, is a program for folks who are looking to invest in venture capital funds, right? Not in the distinction I would say there is, it's not just about learning, it's learning by doing, right? So again, there's not a hard requirement to make an investment during the program, but we are filtering for people who have the ability to and would be excited given the right opportunity to put some capital to work, because we think that's the best way really to learn. Okay, so I think we covered all of the questions. There's some really great questions. So thank you all for bearing with me, during my my talking portion, and really fantastic questions. So if I can, be of assistance with additional questions or follow up, you can always email me. It's Sam, SAM at Dussel Group. I'll put it into chat here quickly. But the proper next step is really go to the LP Institute website, apply for the program, and get on an interview with myself. So thank you all for attending today. Hopefully we'll be on interview calls with most of you soon. And otherwise, feel free to email me with any follow-up questions you might have. All right, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesdays. Bye.